you need to add some. In this vehicle, you just take this off and you pour it right in. And there's two types of antifreeze, generally speaking. There's a green colored one and a red colored one. Most all your modern vehicles use the new red one. It's a lot safer for if you leave some out or spill some on the ground. If an animal drinks that old green antifreeze, they will most likely die. It's almost impossible to save them if they drink enough of that. So the newer red antifreeze, still don't want to drink it by any means, but it's a little bit safer than the old green antifreeze is. It also has some different corrosion protection stuff and all, but the main thing is you want to look inside, see if you got green antifreeze. You do, you put green back in. If you got red, you want to put the red back in. But most all your modern vehicles now are going to use that newer red type antifreeze. So unless you got a really old vehicle, probably won't be an issue. Next is brake fluid, and this is our brake fluid right here. And you can see again the level inside there. You got markings on this side. For those of you on this side, you might can see it says minimum and maximum, and we're just below the maximum level there. Brake fluid, very important because it's one thing to have a vehicle that won't start. It's quite a different thing when your vehicle won't stop. So always make sure you check your brake fluid periodically, and if you need to top that off, usually on the top of the reservoir there, it'll tell you what type of brake fluid. If not, your owner's manual will, and we'll talk about owner's manual here in just a minute. Also things like power steering fluid, it's right here. That's something that you need to keep a check on. If you're turning your steering wheel and you hear a whining noise, that means you probably need some power steering fluid. You might be leaking, might be losing it somewhere, so you want to get that checked as well. But if you need to add power steering fluid, it's right there. And last but not least is oil and transmission fluid. On this vehicle, our oil dipstick is over on this side of the engine, and when you're checking the oil, there's a couple things to remember. One, and again, this isn't a good situation because our vehicle is kind of sitting on a hill, kind of leaning a little bit. You want your vehicle as level as possible when you check the oil. So, you know, for today's purposes, it's okay. But if you really want to get an accurate reading on your oil level, make sure your vehicle is sitting flat and level as possible. And you want to make sure that you didn't just switch the engine off. The engine needs to be cooled down good, so that what happens is when your motor is running, the oil is pumping through the engine, it's all going up top, running back down. So when you shut it off, some of that oil is still going to be up in the top of the engine. You're not going to get an accurate reading if you first pull it out. And a lot of times when you pull the stick out, when it's just been shut off, you'll have oil way up the stick. I've already wiped this one off because we was showing someone earlier. But sometimes what will happen when you pull it out, you'll see oil way up here on the stick if you just shut the engine off because it's been sloshing around. So you want to wipe it off when you pull it out. And let me grab a rag right quick. You want to wipe all the old oil off. Stick the dipstick back in, all the way in, pull it back out, and you'll see the oil right there. You can see those hash marks on it. That is where the safe operating range for the motor is. And so as long as your oil is in between those lines and on those hash marks, and you've got adequate oil. If it gets all the way down to the bottom, most vehicles, that means you need to add 1 quart. And so you put 1 quart of oil in to bring it back up fully topped off.
And why is it important to have clean oil?
The reason it's important to have clean oil and plenty of oil is because it's essentially the lifeblood of the engine. Without oil, you'll be purchasing a new engine or a new vehicle. It's not going to run without oil. It'll run with low oil, but you're also slowly damaging your engine. If you're going completely out of oil, you'll probably completely ruin your engine.
I say that if you want a good story, my sister thought she'd be real smart when my nephews were the age, and she bought a auction vehicle, and it was pretty new and so forth, and they didn't get very far with it. Apparently whoever had it had just been putting oil in and never changing the filter, so the engine was beyond dirty.
Yeah.
And it eventually just broke. So.
Yep. If you've seen how dark the oil was, this truck needs an oil change. It is definitely due for one. If you had just changed the oil, it would be very hard to see the oil sometimes on the stick because it'll be completely clear almost, so it'll just look like water. So sometimes you have to kind of get it in the sunlight and just look to see where it's wet. That way you can tell where your oil level is. The older the oil is, the easier it is to see on the stick. I don't know if we're going to talk about oil changes. I mean, that's kind of a whole different thing. If somebody's got a question about changing your oil later, we'll do that. We won't worry about that right now. The other important fluid is transmission fluid. This one, in this vehicle, the stick is on the other side. Now, when you're checking the transmission fluid, if you can see, it gives you some instructions here actually on the dipstick. Don't add if in the cross-hatched area. So if it's anywhere in that one, you don't want to add any extra oil. So it's good to go. Check when hot, idling in park. So when you check the transmission fluid, instead of like with the oil where you want to check it with the engine off and cooled down, and so the oil is all settled, the transmission fluid, the transmission has to actually be pumping the oil in order to get an accurate reading. So if you want to drive it, best case scenario is to drive it around for a few minutes, get the transmission up to temperature, and then get it back level on level ground, pull it out, and wipe off the dipstick fluid there, and we're going to insert it back in just like we did with the oil. Of course, we may not have any on it because the engine is not running right now. We got some on it, but see, if you notice it's way up past the full mark, that's because the transmission is not pumping the oil around, so it's all settled in the bottom. Most of the time your transmissions will have some specific instructions on how to check them, so be sure you look on the stick. First of all, owner's manual is another good place to get that information about that.
How often do you check both of those?
Transmission fluid, probably every couple of oil changes. Oil change in the newer vehicles, that your car will tell you when it's time for an oil change. In your older vehicles, you have to kind of keep up with your mileage, and the oil companies will tell you about 3,000 miles. Every 3,000 miles, change your oil. That's because they want to sell you more oil. Most of the time you can get 6,000 to 10,000 miles if you check your mileage against what your car computer tells you. Nowadays, you're going to get between 6,000 to 10,000 miles on your oil. So it kind of depends on how much you drive. Will depend on how often you need to check these things. If you like I live right here in Lakeland and I work right here in Lakeland, so I'm only driving a few miles back and to each day to work. If you live in Lakeland and work in Valdosta, you're putting 10 times as many miles each week on. You're going to need to check all these things a lot more often than I would, because that's really going to be how you judge how often. The short answer is you can't do it too often. I mean, if you checked everything once a week, you're not hurting anything. You're keeping a good close check. But the transmission fluid you do not have to check as often, generally speaking, unless you have a problem, a leak or something. Most vehicles can go 50,000 miles without ever having to add any transmission fluid, whereas the oil is going to constantly be changing. One other thing, maintenance-wise, your air filter in this vehicle that's inside this tube right here. You pull this little handle up right here and separate that, and it's got a paper type filter inside. That needs to be changed. I don't remember the exact, I think about 10,000 to 15,000 miles is what's recommended on that. If you live on a dirt road and drive on a farm like I do, you could probably change it over 5,000 miles and be a lot better off. All right, any questions so far about fluids?
So how long until you get the oil change?
Like I said, they're going to recommend anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 miles usually, but you can usually safely go 6,000 to 10,000. So you keep a check with your odometer inside and write down when you changed it, what the mileage was, the date. And also, if you don't drive your vehicle very often, they recommend changing the oil once a year, even if you don't get the number of miles, just because the oil can lose its viscosity rating and all over time just sitting as well.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, we're going to step back under the tent there for a minute. Move on to the next thing we're going to talk about. And that's the owner's manual. You'll usually find this inside of the glove box. And most guys, we don't like reading the directions, but this is a very important thing to do. Is gives you a lot of very specific information about your vehicle, by the people who built and designed your vehicle. So they're going to know. You know, in this day and age, we tend to Google everything. So if we got a question about the car, we just like pull out our phone and Google it. But you can get some bad information because you know, if I drive this F-150 pickup and Miss Amy drives a Honda car, some of the maintenance stuff's going to be different. Some of the information about where stuff's located is going to be completely different. So owner's manuals are very helpful, and most people never even look at these. I recently, well not recently, about 5 years ago I purchased a used vehicle, and when I looked inside for the owner's manual, the previous owner had went through and highlighted stuff and had paper clips in there on pages and had maintenance records in the back, and that was like, I drove that car for 5 years and never had, until like right at the very end, started to have some issues, and it was an old car, but had been very well taken care of, and so it was in very good shape. I paid $4,500 for that car and drove it for 5 years without spending any, I mean, just, you know, regular maintenance like we just talked about. No repairs. So it makes a difference when you take care of your vehicle. It'll make or break you financially in terms of the vehicle. Anything you want to know basically is going to be in this owner's manual, from how to operate the stereo all the way down to changing the oil and location of stuff in the vehicle. So we'll refer back to talking about this several times today. There's one thing I want to tell you. One thing that you'll find in here is your fuse location inside your fuse box. If you have electrical problems with your vehicle, if you get in and say you go to switch on your headlights and your headlights don't come on, and of course you're going to need headlights to drive at night. So one of the first things you want to check is the fuses. With headlights, the next thing you'd want to check would be the bulbs, but sometimes a fuse can blow. I had to get this out one time because we were pulling a trailer that had some pretty sketchy wiring on the trailer, and it blew all of my tail light fuses, so I didn't have tail lights or brake lights or anything. And I was digging around under there, and of course when you look at the fuse box, and it's so buried up under the dash in this truck, I wouldn't be able to show it to you because you'd have to lay on your back on the floorboard to see it. But when you look in there, there's like 50 fuses, and so without knowing which fuse is for those lights, you know, you don't know what to check and what to replace. And so owner's manual, very important. If you don't, when you buy a used vehicle, ask the person before you purchase the vehicle if there's an owner's manual, and make sure to tell them you want an owner's manual if you're going to buy that vehicle. New vehicles will always have one in it. All right. Any questions about that?